All right, well, whenever everyone's ready to get started.
Good. That's the phone.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that one. Okay.
Oh.
I think it's good. Okay. We'll have a parent.
So no.
Yeah, no pattern. Pen's good too.
A couple sheets of paper would also work.
Yeah.
Actually, I would love a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Um,
I want some small pieces.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm so bad.
Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you. When have you guys ready?
Good morning, Your Honor. Before we proceed with the trial, permission to make introductions.
Go ahead.
My name is Marra Edwards, and I'm joined today by my co-counsel, Ms. Lillian Meyer. Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
Together, we represent the government, and today we'll be joined at council table by Agent Morgan DeVico. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Appearances from the defense.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Josiah Jones, and today I'm joined by my co-counsel, Mr. Dylan Darwish.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Together, we represent the defendant in today's case, Ms. Blake Crosby.
Good morning, Your Honor.
After the prosecution's pre-trial matters, we'll have a few of our own we'd like to attend to.
Your Honor, as this is our first time appearing in your court, would you like us to ask permission when approaching the bench, witness, jury, opposing counsel?
Ask before approaching, ask to approach.
Yes, Your Honor, and pursuant to stipulations 16 and 17, exhibits 16 and 17 are, all parties have waived objections to those. Permission to enter those at this time and publish to the jury.
Any objections to that?
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, enough.
Permission to publish to the jury.
Yeah.
With that, Your Honor, we're ready to proceed.
Just one matter, Your Honor. I'd like to invoke Rule 603, constructively swearing in all witnesses who testify throughout the course of today's trial.
Yes, correct.
And with that, Your Honor, we're ready for opening statements.
Excellent. Well, let's start.
May I proceed? It took one shot to kill Senator Thomas Capello on July 4th, 2022. One shot right in the middle of his forehead by a skilled and experienced sniper. Members of the jury will hear that at 1:45 p.m. Senator Capello stepped out on stage at a political rally here in Philadelphia and began speaking. Thousands of his supporters, protesters, and opponents watched a man who was likely to become the next president of the United States. You'll also hear that 600 yards away, 25 stories up, was a woman with a rifle in her hand, finger on the trigger pointed at Senator Capello. 2 minutes later, July 4th, 2022, it went from a day celebrating American history to a day that's going to live in infamy in American history textbooks. A single shot rang out. Senator Capello fell to the floor. He was dead. Out of the thousands of people in attendance at that rally, only one could have killed him. Members of the jury took a skilled and experienced sniper. Members of the jury, those aren't my words. Those aren't my co-counsel's words. Those are the defendant's words. Because when the defendant was asked, who could kill Thomas Capello? Members of the jury, you'll hear that she said 5 words. A skilled and experienced sniper. And so you're going to hear that the defendant fits the bill. You'll hear the defendant received formal training as a sniper in the US Army. You'll hear that she was probably one of the most skilled and the most experienced snipers in the United States. You'll also hear that she didn't like Senator Arabella, because as long as he was alive, he was a threat to every single person in the country. Again, those aren't my words, those aren't my co-counsel's words, they're the defendant's words. Today, you're going to hear that the defendant not only had the ability and the motive, but that she had the opportunity. Members of the jury, she's going to have to admit that on July 4th, 2022, she was in Philadelphia. She'll admit to staying at the same hotel that those shots rang out from. And you're going to hear that there was an eyewitness that places her on that rooftop hours before the shooting. You'll hear that on that rooftop, the FBI found two important things: a blue bullet and a cigarette butt. You'll hear that that bullet was made to be used with a military-grade sniper rifle. And you'll hear that that cigarette, well, you'll hear that the forensic report found that it had to have been within 5 feet of a firearm that was discharged. You'll also hear whose cigarette it was. We'll hear that it was a 1 in 6.2 billion match for the defendant. That's why we charge the defendant with murder. That means that as the government, we have to prove that the defendant killed Thomas Capella intentionally and deliberately. That's called malice aforethought. And as the government, we have the burden to prove that to you beyond a reasonable doubt. Members of the jury, we intend to meet that burden by showing you that to kill Thomas Capella, it took a skilled and experienced sniper. Today, you're going to hear from Agent Morgan DeVito. She's going to take you through her investigation and how in her search for a skilled and experienced sniper, she found the defendant. Members of the jury, there were millions of people who supported Thomas Capella. Millions of people who disliked Thomas Capella. Today, we'll hear that there was only one person that could have killed Thomas Capella: a skilled and experienced sniper. And at the end of today's trial, after you've heard all the evidence, I'm going to stand before you and ask that you find that skilled and experienced sniper guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel.
Open in front of the defense, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Nicholas Court. The best the government can do is guess. It's July 4th, 2022. And Senator Thomas Capella is on the ground. He's dead. Someone has just assassinated the person who is very likely going to be this nation's next president. But today, what you're going to learn is that the government guessed that the person who pulled that trigger was my client, Blake Crosby. What you're going to learn today is that this is Blake Crosby. She's a former veteran. She served this nation in our US military, 2 tours in Afghanistan. She spent 8 years protecting the people of this country. You're going to learn today that she is not the person who pulled the trigger killing Senator Thomas Capella. Instead, what you're going to learn is that the government guessed. And the best they can do in this case is guess. And as the court's going to instruct you later in trial today, a guess isn't good enough. Because when the government decided to charge my client with murder, they brought with them a burden to prove every single element of those charges beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the highest burden in our criminal justice system, and it's a burden this government will fail to meet. Because what you'll come to find out throughout the course of this trial is that the best they can do is guess. To show you that, members of the jury, I'm going to ask you to pay attention to 3 guesses that we expect the government won't be able to hide in their case today. Number 1, the time. Number 2, the weapon. And 3, the suspect. So let's start by talking about how you're going to find out that the government guessed about the time of this assassination. You're going to hear that everyone in this courtroom agrees that at some point, Miss Crosby was on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel. But what the government won't be able to prove throughout the course of trial today is that at 1:45 p.m. on July 4th of 2022, Miss Crosby was there. No photos, no surveillance, no eyewitnesses, no phone data. They're going to fail to prove the time. Then we're going to walk you through guess number 2. Because today the government's going to ask you to guess that Miss Crosby had access to the murder weapon. But you won't actually get to see that murder weapon here in court today, members of the jury, because you'll learn that the government never found it. Instead, you're going to learn that they blamed an experienced sniper with military experience. You're going to hear that she didn't even have access to a murder weapon. You're going to hear that she didn't purchase a weapon while she was here in Philadelphia. You're going to learn that she hasn't even touched a sniper since she was in the military 6 years ago. And we're going to walk you through guess number 3. The other suspects. Because like Miss Edwards just told you, they told you that they're going to be able to rule out all other suspects in this case, that Miss Crosby is the one person who will have fit the bill, as they will. But what you're going to learn is that there are thousands of other people at that rally. Thousands of other people who are expressing their disagreement with Thomas Capello. Thousands of other people who have sent hate mail, death threats to Thomas Capello that their government witness will be able to testify to in court today. You're going to learn that they won't be able to rule out a single one of those other suspects. We're going to ask you to look out for those guesses in the government's case, members of the jury. The time, the weapon, and the suspect. The most important thing that I want you to remember throughout the course of today's trial, it's that oath that you took before we even started this entire process. The oath that you swore to the parties at issue today. The oath that you swore to the court. The oath that you swore to yourselves. To hold the government to their burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Because if you do that today, we expect that you'll find that the best the government can do in this case is guess. That's why at the end of today's trial, I'll stand before you again and I'll ask that you find Blake Crosby not guilty. Thank you for your time.
Does the government have any witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the government calls Agent Morgan Debnath.
Who are constructively sworn in?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Go ahead.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good morning. My name is Morgan Debnath.
What do you do for a living?
I currently work as an agent with the Secret Service.
Can you tell us about your background in working for the Secret Service?
Sure. I've been in the service for about 21 years now. I've been in charge of numerous different types of investigations, including looking into potential assassinations.
How are you involved in today's case?
Well, I was asked to be one of the investigators in charge of looking into the homicide of a former presidential candidate, Thomas Capella.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Thomas Capella?
Thomas Capella was a presidential candidate in the last election cycle. He had garnered about 30% of the popular vote before he was assassinated.
You just mentioned that he was assassinated. When was that?
The date was July 4th of 2022, last year.
And where was that?
It was here in Philadelphia at Rittenhouse Square.
Would you recognize a map of the surrounding area for where Mr. Capella was speaking if I were to show it to you?
I would.
Showing Mr. Jones a copy of Exhibit 3. Permission to approach the witness with the same.
Thank you.
Can you tell us what I just handed?
This is a map that shows the area where Mr. Capella was assassinated, as well as the surrounding location.
Is it fair and accurate?
Looks like it.
At this time, the government offers Exhibit 3.
No objection.
It's admitted.
Agent DeVico, can you show us on that map where Mr. Capella was when he was speaking?
Right, so looking on this map here, this green marking here, that's Rittenhouse Square. Mr. Capella was giving a speech in this park in Philadelphia.
Now, when during his speech did Mr. Capello get assassinated?
So he started speaking at about 1:45 p.m. that afternoon. Just 2 minutes into that speech, he was assassinated.
How did you begin your investigation?
So I was actually standing in the crowd at that rally as a part of my protective detail. And when I heard that gunshot, I was able to determine it was far enough away. It couldn't have been any kind of close range shooting. So that's when
Objection, Your Honor, it's the lack of foundation.
Explain.
Yes, Your Honor, this witness just testified that she was able to determine the distance from that gunshot without laying any other foundation as to how she knows that.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor. Agent DeVico just testified that she was at the rally while it happened. She's testifying to her rationally based perception that after watching the shot and hearing the shot, she then determined that it couldn't have happened at that rally.
Can I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead.
Your Honor, that's an expert level opinion dealing with ballistics in this case. If this witness wants to rely on FBI findings and reports to determine that information, she can do so. But at this point, she's still a lay witness testifying to information that's not based on her rational perception.
If I may be heard on those grounds?
Yes, before you respond, what was the precise testimony? What exactly did she say?
I believe the witness testified to that it wasn't possible for that gunshot to have come from the crowd based on what she heard.
Okay.
Your Honor, at the beginning of the trial, we offered exhibit number 16. That's the forensic report. That forensic report has all of the information that Agent DeVico is testifying to.
And Your Honor, on those grounds, Your Honor.
Yes.
Your Honor, if the witness is referring to the findings of that FBI report, then she certainly may do so. But at this point, she's testifying as to her own perception. It's inadmissible.
Yeah, I agree. If she's gonna testify to facts that are in the report, that's fine. Sounds like they're in evidence, but she should lay the foundation, explain that they're in the report, because I did think that it sounded, I think the jury would come to the conclusion that that was her expert testimony, right? So let's not get there.
Yes.
Sustain.
Motion to strike that testimony at this point.
Sure.
Agent DeVico, were you able to determine if that gunshot came from anyone at that rally?
I was. I reviewed a forensic report from the FBI in this case that indicated this gunshot, it couldn't have come from the crowd itself. So we started looking into the possibility that it came from some sort of long-range shooter, like a sniper. So we scoured the area for any kind of potential shooter around the area of the rally as depicted in this exhibit. And we continued that search until we received a tip later that night.
Well, who was that tip from?
It was from a person named Harper Edwards.
Well, were you able to speak with Ms. Edwards?
Right, so we did speak to Ms. Edwards. She informed us that she was an employee at a certain Sonesta hotel.
All right, well, you said that you received a tip. Could you tell us what she told you?
I can. She told us that while she was at the Sonesta hotel on July 4th, she saw someone walking up the staircase towards the roof.
I want to be clear on the time. Did she tell you what time she saw that person walking toward the roof?
She did. It was around noon on that same day.
And who was that person that she saw walking up toward the roof of the Sonesta Hotel?
So we showed Harper Edwards, that employee, a few six-packs so she could try to identify who that person was. And she identified that individual as the defendant, Blake Crosby.
Let's talk about the defendant in just a moment. But first, Ms. Edwards told you that she was looking, or that the person was going up to the rooftop.
Right.
Did you ever search that rooftop?
We did. We ended up going to that rooftop to look for any kind of forensic evidence we could find, tying any information back to Blake Crosby.
What'd you find?
So there were a few things we found on that rooftop. Once I got there, got to see the location for myself, I looked over the ledge and I saw that there was a clear line of sight all the way down to Rittenhouse Square from where that hotel was. You could even see the exact podium where Mr. Capello would have been giving his speech. Aside from that clear line of sight, there was also a bullet that was found on that rooftop and a cigarette.
When you found that bullet and cigarette butt, what did you do with it?
So when we found that bullet, that cigarette butt, we sent it to the lab for testing for any kind of forensic evidence.
Back to the defendant. Did you ever speak with the defendant?
I didn't personally speak to the defendant, but I was sitting in on an FBI interview that they conducted with the defendant.
What did you learn about it?
Well, from that interview, I learned that the defendant claimed to be in Philadelphia that day to attend a protest for Mr. Capello's rally.
Did you learn anything about her prior work history?
I did. I learned that the defendant was a military-grade trained sniper.
Now, you just mentioned that she was in Philadelphia. Did you find out where the defendant was staying while she was there?
I did. Well, we learned from that same interview that the defendant was staying at the Sonesta Hotel.
Did you learn anything about her whereabouts on July 4th?
I did. As I was mentioning, the defendant claimed that she was not only staying at the Sonesta Hotel, but actually attending the rally itself in Rittenhouse Square.
Did she tell you where did you find out where she went after the rally?
I did. So after she mentioned that she'd been at the rally, she said that she left the area, walked around the city for a little bit of time, and then ended up at the local Cleavers for lunch.
You just mentioned Cleavers. Why did that stand out to you?
Right, so Cleavers became important to our investigation because we actually received a tip that a piece of some kind of weapon had been deposited into a trash can at that location.
Would you recognize that piece of the weapon if I were to show it to you?
I would.
Let the record reflect and approaching Mr. Jones with a copy of the exhibit 11. May I approach the witness with the same?
Yes, fine.
Thank you.
What about his hand?
Right, so this is that piece of the murder weapon I was just discussing. It's a trigger guard.
Objection, Your Honor, it's a lack of foundation.
Explain.
Yes, Your Honor, this witness just testified that this is definitively a piece of the murder weapon that was used on July 4th of 2022. We don't have that foundation on the record for how she knows this is a piece that came from that murder weapon.
Response.
Your Honor, that's an issue of weight and not admissibility. Agent DeVico conducted this investigation, and throughout this investigation, she found that piece of that weapon. That's her opinion that she rationally based on the investigation that she conducted. Now, if Mr. Jones believes that that's not a piece of the murder weapon, that's certainly something that he can take up on cross. But at this point, that's an issue of weight and not admissibility.
Can I respond, Your Honor?
Yeah, good.
Your Honor, there's an inherent danger for allowing this agent to testify definitively that that's the piece of the murder weapon without the foundation for her knowledge on that point. At this point, she hasn't laid the foundation to that point.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, she can say that this is the weapon she found, this is the piece of the weapon she found. She could even say she suspects, that this might have been involved in the murder, but she would still have to lay foundation for why she suspects that, I think. So she can't just call things murder weapons without foundation. So I'm gonna just say it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Motion to retract that portion of the testimony.
Yes, sure.
So Agent DeVico, could you tell us what that is?
Right, so this is a trigger guard. It's a part of a weapon that was found inside a trash can at that Cleavers.
And is it a fair and accurate representation of what you found?
Looks like it.
At this time, government offers exhibit 11.
No objection to the picture, Your Honor.
Okay, it's admitted.
Now, Agent DeVico, was forensic able to tell you anything about this trigger guard?
Yes, so we sent this trigger guard to the lab for testing as well, and we were able to determine that, well, this would have been used in a Steyr SSG-69 sniper rifle.
What kind of bullet would be used with that kind of gun?
Well, with the type of gun that this trigger guard would have been a part of, it would have been a 51 millimeter bullet, exactly.
Well, I want to talk about that. I'm approaching Mr. Jones with exhibits 5 and 7, and the witness to this. May I approach witness?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
Could you tell us what I just handed you?
Right, so what I'm holding here, that's an example of a 51 millimeter bullet, and this is a cigarette.
And are those fair and accurate copies of what you collected on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel?
Yes, these are those exact pieces of evidence.
At this time, government offers exhibit 5 and 7.
No objections for stipulation, Your Honor.
Okay, they're admitted.
Agent DeVito, you mentioned that forensics ran reports on both of those exhibits, and I want to talk about that bullet first. What was forensics able to tell you about that bullet?
Right, so what we were able to find is that this bullet found on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel was the exact same kind of bullet that was found inside the victim's head.
And what about that cigarette butt?
Right, so when we took a look at this cigarette butt, there were really two main things of importance that we found. First, this cigarette butt, it had gunshot residue, or GSR on it. So that told us it had to be found within 5 feet of where that gunshot rang out on that rooftop.
Whose cigarette was it?
That cigarette, it belonged to the defendant.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor. Permission to publish exhibits 11, 3, 5, and 7 to the jury?
Yes, granted.
Before I proceed, Your Honor, may I actually retrieve those two exhibits?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much, appreciate it. May I proceed?
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, Agent.
Good morning.
Let's start by talking about the pressure you were under while you were conducting this investigation. Agent, you'd agree with me that this is actually the very first time that you're testifying in an investigation murder that you conducted, right?
Well, in my 21 years with the Secret Service, I've been a part of a number of investigations, including investigations into attempted murders or homicides.
So none of those investigations that you've actually conducted were murders.
That's correct. Our job in the Secret Service is to protect the people that we're in charge of those Secret Service details for.
None of those investigations involved homicides at all.
That's correct.
Agent, this is the first time that you're testifying in a matter involving homicide.
Right, this is the first homicide specifically.
And you were under some pressure with this investigation, weren't you, Agent?
I wouldn't say that, no, it's all part of the job.
You wouldn't say that. Senator Thomas Capello was a presidential candidate, right?
He was.
He was killed in a public area.
That's correct. As I was mentioning, he was assassinated in Rittenhouse Square.
And you found that the public, they wanted answers for that assassination.
Objection, Your Honor, to speculation.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor, the question as phrased was you found that the public wanted answers for that assassination. She can testify based on her rationally based perception as to what she found.
Response?
Your Honor, Agent DeVito can't testify to the thoughts and feelings of the general public, Your Honor. We don't even know who Mr. Jones is specifically talking about. He can't speculate as to what people felt and what they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a broadly worded question, but I take your point that I guess she can answer precisely what she knows, what she doesn't know. So well taken. I guess we'll see how she answers it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Agent, I'll ask you that question one more time. You found that the public wanted answers for this assassination.
I can't really say. As a part of our investigation, we didn't interview any members of the public for their thoughts and opinions on this matter.
The news outlets, they were covering this assassination, wouldn't you say?
That's correct.
And the FBI, they started searching immediately into this assassination, right?
Right, there was a joint investigation with both the FBI and the Secret Service.
Your office, the Secret Service, wanted answers for this assassination, right?
Right, it was part of our job to investigate who was responsible for this homicide.
Ma'am, immediately after you cleared the scene of Mr. Capello's assassination, that's when you started investigating this crime, correct?
That's right.
You identified one person of interest?
Right, at first, everyone is a suspect until they're not, but we narrowed it down to one specific person of interest.
My client, Ms. Crosby, that was that one person of interest.
That's correct.
And I want to talk about whether or not you guessed during this investigation. Starting with the issue of time in this case. You'd agree with me, you were just speaking with Ms. Edwards about this cigarette butt, right?
Right, that's a cigarette butt that we found on the rooftop belonging to the defendant.
And you were speaking with the members of the jury about the FBI report that was created.
That's correct.
And you'd agree with me that nowhere in that report does it give you any information as to when the DNA was left on this cigarette butt.
No, it can't give us a specific time frame, just that it belonged to the defendant.
So it can't give you a specific time frame. Those are your words, Agent, right?
That's right.
And you talked to us a little bit about this bullet, right?
Right,
Agent, you determined that this was an unused bullet throughout the course of your investigation, right?
that's correct.
Had no fingerprints on it,
That's right.
no DNA,
That's correct. No fingerprints or DNA or really any forensic evidence for tying that to the defendant.
no forensic evidence tying this to this crime, correct?
Right,
Agent, let's talk a little bit more about what you found throughout the course of your investigation, because you also mentioned this trigger guard, correct?
that's right.
Agent, I want to be very clear, you can't tie this trigger guard to a murder weapon in this case, can you?
No, sir, but we can determine that it would have belonged to a Steyr SSG-69 sniper rifle.
So let's talk about that a little bit more and whether you guessed in coming to that conclusion. Because ma'am, where you found this trigger guard was in the trash can of a Cleaver's restaurant, right?
That's right. Later that day, we received a tip from that Cleavers that a piece of that weapon had been deposited into their trash can.
A trash can that was public from what you could tell, right?
From what I could tell, yes.
Trash can that anyone had access to from what you could tell, right?
Right.
A trash can where anyone could have deposited anything into, correct?
Not sure about anyone or anything, but I think I understand what you mean.
Well, you determined that trash can to have public access, correct?
That's correct.
All right, Amy. Let's move then and talk about the third thing you may have guessed about during the course of this investigation. Because you told us that you identified Blake Crosby as the one person of interest during your investigation, right?
That's right.
But you would agree with me, this wasn't a private assassination, was it?
Private assassination. Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean.
That's okay, ma'am, I can clarify. Mr. Capello, he wasn't murdered in a private place, right?
Oh, no, yes, the rally, it was open air. He was giving a stage piece publicly.
Now, this was a public execution, wouldn't you say?
That's right.
There were thousands of people in attendance,
Right, in the crowd alone, there were thousands of attendees.
thousands of people supporting Mr. Capello,
That's right.
thousands of people who opposed the views expressed by Mr. Capello, right?
That's right. At the rally, there were also protesters.
Agent, you weren't able to determine whether those thousands of people who opposed Mr. Capello had weapons on you, were you?
No, I didn't see any weapons on the individuals in the crowd when I was in that crowd itself, but I couldn't determine for certain.
And you know that Thomas Capello, he was a public figure that was controversial, right?
Right, you can say that.
That's because there were people who adamantly disagreed with his views that you found, right?
That's right. There were people who adamantly agreed and adamantly disagreed with his views.
Agent, it was part of your job as the head of his protection detail to monitor things like social media,
That's correct.
like the dark web,
That's right.
for threats that might be imminent on the Senate, correct?
That's exactly right.
Agent, what you found was that there was hate mail being sent to the Senate, right?
That's correct. For many of the political candidates or representatives that we protect, they receive death threats, things like that.
Death threats, Agent, those were sent to the senator as well, right?
That's right.
More death threats than you are able to count.
That's typical in our line of work.
Finally, Agent, I just want to touch on how you believe this crime happened, because you told us you believe it happened at the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel, correct?
Right, that's where we determined that bullet had to be shot from.
And you were speaking with us about the likelihood of that being a sniper rifle, correct?
That's correct.
And you talked about the testimony of Harper Edwards, right?
Yes, that employee at the Sonesta Hotel.
That employee also mentioned in that sworn statement that you don't need to be a guest of that hotel to have access to the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel, right?
Sure, the rooftop itself didn't have any kind of lock on it.
No key card was needed.
No, not to the roof specifically.
No physical key was needed to have access to that rooftop.
That's correct.
Agent, you would agree. Any of those people who were protesting Thomas Capello, they would have had access to that public rooftop.
I'm not sure if any of them would have had access, but you're right that there was no key card or physical key required.
So we can agree that there was no thing stopping any of those protesters from going up to the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel.
I mean, honestly, I can't say about any of those protesters, but you're right that there was no key card specific.
Thank you for your time today, Agent. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just ask that Agent Vico be allowed to step down.
You're excused, Agent.
Yes, sir.
And at this time, the government closes their case in chief.
Are we doing breaks now?
There's no.
No, Your Honor.
Any witnesses for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, we call Ms. Blake Crosby. May we proceed?
Are all the judges good to go? Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning, ma'am. Would you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good morning. My name is Blake Crosby.
And you've been here all throughout trial today, hearing the allegations from Ms. Edwards and the government. But I want to give you a chance to address those allegations head on. Ma'am, did you ever take a sniper rifle up to the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel?
No,
Ma'am, did you kill Senator Thomas Capella?
no,
With that in mind, I want to give the members of the jury a chance to get to know you. Can you tell them where you're from?
I'm from Los Angeles, California.
What do you do for a living, ma'am?
I'm actually self-employed right now. I work for Uber and Lyft, and in LA, I get a lot of customers, so that's helpful.
Did you ever serve in our military?
I did. I served for about 8 years in the US Army. I did a tour in Afghanistan from 2014 to 2016.
I'm gonna take a step back, ma'am, and talk a little bit about the days of July 4th, 2022. Can you tell us how the morning of that day started out for you?
Yes, on the morning of July 4th, I got up around 5 a.m. like I normally do. I worked out for about an hour, showered, ate breakfast, and then I went to the rally at Rittenhouse Square where presidential candidate Thomas Capella was going to be speaking that afternoon.
Around what time did you get to the rally that day?
I arrived around 1 p.m., which is the time that the rally started.
Did you get to see Senator Capella?
I did. He got on stage at 1:45 and he began to speak, and just moments after he started speaking, he was shot.
Happened after Mr. Capella was shot.
It was pure chaos. A truly disturbing sight. People were running and screaming and crying, and I'd seen people get shot before being in the military, but this was different and it shook me to my core.
Ma'am, the government has claimed that at that time, 1:45 p.m., you were on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel conducting that assassination. Do you think if I showed you a map of Rittenhouse Square, you'd be able to tell me exactly where you were that day?
Yes,
Your Honor, let the record reflect that I'm approaching the witness and Ms. Edwards, who was marked as Exhibit 3. It's actually already in evidence. Ma'am, do you recognize that?
yes, it is the map of Center City, Philadelphia, showing Rittenhouse Square where the rally was on July 4th.
Fair and accurate from the last time that you saw it.
Yes,
Do you think if I gave you a marker, you could indicate for the members of the jury where you were?
yes, I would be able to.
Permission to approach, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
All right, then. Can you mark for the members of the jury on that exhibit with a circle exactly where you were at 1:45 p.m.?
Yes. So this right here, this green box is Rittenhouse Square. That's where the rally was taking place. At 1:45, I was standing right outside of Park, a restaurant nearby. And here it is, I circled it for you on the map.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that this witness has just circled the area surrounding Park on exhibit 3 and indicated that to the members.
It will reflect that.
So ma'am, at 1:45 p.m., Did you have been at the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel?
No,
Then let's move and talk about whether or not the government made guesses during the course of this investigation, starting with the time that they're claiming this happened. Now, I'm going to read something and I want to get your thoughts on it. Your Honor, we offer exhibit 18 at this time, pursuant to pretrial orders. There's no objection.
Is that your understanding?
Yes, Your Honor.
We're just going to read from that document.
Go ahead.
Affidavit of Great Judge, starting in line 34. On July 4th, I saw Crosby at the Capello event. I didn't talk to Crosby, I just saw Crosby at Rittenhouse Square in the crowd of protesters. Don't remember what Crosby was wearing, can't tell you what time I saw Crosby, except it must have been after I got there at 10 a.m. and before the shooting around 1:45 p.m. Stopping there. Ma'am, 10 a.m. to 1:45 p.m. Does that sound accurate as for the time that you were present at Rittenhouse Square?
yes, it does. Like I said, that morning got up early, and after I ate breakfast, I made my way to Rittenhouse Square. I was there by 1 p.m. the time that the rally started. So yes.
Let's move then and talk about the second guess that the government may have made during the course of their investigation. The weapon. Have you heard them claim that it's possible that a sniper rifle was the weapon responsible for killing Senator Capello?
Yes, I did hear that.
Agent, I want to be upfront with the members of the jury. Do you have experience with sniper rifles?
I do. I served in the military, and I was a sniper in the military, so I do have experience with a sniper rifle.
When you were in Philadelphia on July 4th of 2022, did you have access to a sniper rifle?
No, I flew in from LA, Boston, and then went to Philadelphia. I didn't have a gun with me.
At any point while you were here, did you purchase a sniper rifle?
No,
Ma'am, you just mentioned being at 3 other campaign stops. At any of those other stops, did you have a sniper rifle with you?
no.
Ma'am, when's the last time you even fired a sniper?
I was out of the military about 6 years ago. That's the last time I would have even fired a rifle.
Let's move then and talk about the third case that the government may be making today, choosing you as the prime suspect. Ma'am, when you were at the event, did you get a chance to see whether there were other people with you?
Yes, at the rally, there were several thousand people there. I mean, it was a large rally, and there were thousands of people who supported Capello. There was thousands of people who were protesting Capello, and in that crowd of protesters, there were other veterans, other military.
So to be clear, ma'am, were there other people actively expressing their views against Thomas Capello?
Yes, and it's my opinion that Thomas Capello was anti-military, and I believe that he wanted to defund the military. So yeah, the protesters, there were other protesters there protesting Capello and his stances.
Let's talk about what they could have done, ma'am. Were you here when I talked about just a moment ago, the access to that rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel?
Yes, I did hear that.
Ma'am, did you ever go up to the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel?
I did. It was on July 3rd when I checked into the Sonesta. I have a nasty habit. I went up to smoke a cigarette on July 3rd.
Were you up front when you spoke with the FBI about that cigarette that you smoked on July 3rd of 2022?
At first, no, but I eventually did admit that I did smoke a cigarette on the rooftop of the rooftop of the Sonesta on July 3rd.
Why didn't you tell the FBI when they first asked you?
Well, I didn't want to make it seem like I had anything to do with this. This is a horrific crime, and I didn't want to make it seem that I would have been the person up there at any time. So yeah, at first I told them that I wasn't on the roof, but I was on July 3rd to smoke a cigarette.
To be clear, ma'am, access to that rooftop, not needing a key card or a physical key, is that consistent with your experience going up to the roof on July 3rd of 2022?
Yeah, my experience on July 3rd was that I was able to access the roof.
Now, I want to be very clear with the members. Did you have anything at all to do with the death of Senator Thomas Capello?
No, and it's distressing to me that I'm being accused of this crime. My job was to protect this country, to protect every American. This goes against everything I believe in.
Thank you for your time today, Ms. Crosby. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, may I retrieve exhibit 3 from the witness?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, just so you know, I have this.
May I proceed? Yes, go ahead. Ms. Crosby, you just told the jury that this is where you were when Thomas Capello was shot. Is that right?
Yes,
Ms. Crosby, you understand you're under oath today.
yes.
Well, I ask that because you have a problem with telling truth to investigators.
Well, as I said, I wasn't truthful and upfront about being on the rooftop of the Sonesta on July 3rd, but I did eventually admit that I went up there to smoke a cigarette. If that's what you're asking.
Well, we'll get to that in just a moment. But you would agree that this isn't the first time that you're under investigation.
No.
When you were in the military, you were under an investigation, right?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for character.
Point.
Yes, Your Honor, under 404, they're offering this evidence of a prior. Are we outside the earshot of the jury? Just want to
Yeah.
clarify. Yes, Your Honor. They're offering evidence of a dishonorable discharge that this witness will actually testify to. That's going to be offered for the truth, offered for propensity purposes in this case. That she had problems back then and would have had problems in this courtroom 2 years ago.
Got it, okay. Response?
Yes, Your Honor, we're not offering this evidence for any propensity purposes. In fact, we won't even go into the details of the altercation itself. We're offering this under Rule 608 to attack the defendant's character for truthfulness, which is admissible under Rule 608.
May I respond on those grounds, Your Honor?
Yes.
If I could actually direct Your Honor's attention to the exhibit that opposing counsel is referencing.
Okay.
It's actually exhibit 14, the prior service record of this witness. There's plenty of information in that service record regarding honesty, but it doesn't have to deal with the altercation that this witness is referring to right now. Opposing counsel is using the details of that altercation for propensity purposes to show violence on the part, and it's dangerous for the members of the jury to hear that propensity evidence.
If that may be heard on that, Your Honor. First, Your Honor, we're not referencing that exhibit. We're asking the witness for her personal knowledge on the things that she experienced. Furthermore, Your Honor, we're not going into the details of the altercation itself and we're not using those for propensity purposes. Under Rule 608, we are allowed to attack the credibility and the character for truthfulness of this witness. In fact, Your Honor, we'd be fine with a limiting instruction to the jury that we are not offering this for any sort of propensity purposes.
So, okay, are you entering this document?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so as long as the questioning sticks to past instances of truthfulness or untruthfulness, that's fine. If it goes into instances of violence, then you can reiterate it.
Understood, Your Honor.
And Your Honor, if I can clarify, can I ask the witness or I can ask the witness if she was involved in an altercation? I just can't go into the details of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Ms. Crosby, you were involved in an altercation when you were in the military, right?
I was.
And investigators questioned you.
They did.
You told them that you had never been in that altercation.
I did.
You swore under oath that you had not been in that altercation.
Swore under oath.
Yes, you swore under oath that you had not been in that altercation.
Initially, and then I admitted that I was a part of that altercation, yes.
Initially, you didn't even tell investigators that you were in the area of the altercation.
Correct.
But then they presented new evidence.
They did.
Then you changed your story.
Well, I recognize that it was better to just be truthful.
You recognize that after they presented new evidence. Is that right?
I recognize that it was better to be truthful, yes, after they had told me that there was eyewitnesses who saw me there.
I want to talk about this case. Ms. Crosby, how many times did you lie to investigators in this case?
Again, I initially did not admit to being on the rooftop of the Sonesta. When they asked me a few times if I had been up there, I initially said no. And then eventually did admit that I was on the rooftop on July 3rd to smoke a cigarette.
You just said that they asked you a few times. You lied to investigators 4 different times.
4 times, yes, a few times, yes.
They asked you if you had ever seen that rooftop, right?
Yes,
You said no.
initially, yes,
They asked you if you'd ever been on that rooftop, right?
they did.
You said no.
Initially, yes, I did say no.
They asked you if you would recognize a photo of that rooftop, right?
They did.
You said no.
Initially, yes.
You told them that whenever you needed to smoke, you went out on the street, right?
I did tell them that.
You had chance after chance after chance after chance to tell FBI investigators the truth, right?
I did, and eventually, I did tell them the truth, that I was on rooftop with the Sonesta on July 3rd, smoking a cigarette.
The first 4 times they asked, you lied.
Again, yes, initially, up front, I was not truthful.
But then they showed you this cigarette, right?
They did,
They told you it had your DNA on it,
they did tell me that.
and that's when you decided to tell the truth, right?
That's when I admitted to being on the rooftop with the Sonesta on July 3rd.
Miss Crosby, if they had never shown you this cigarette with your DNA on it, still be lying today?
I disagree.
Well, you didn't tell FBI investigators that you were on that roof until they showed you this cigarette.
That's correct, but I disagree that I would have continued to not be truthful about my being on the rooftop on July 3rd.
Miss Crosby, I want to talk to you about your thoughts on this case. Because you were questioned by investigators 3 days after Mr. Capello was murdered, is that right?
Yes,
They asked you what kind of person could commit this crime, right?
they did.
You said it was one kind of person.
What do you mean?
You said that it would take a skilled and experienced sniper.
Yeah, that was my understanding, as being in the military, to make a shot like that, you would have to have some training.
Miss Crosby, you are a skilled and experienced sniper.
Not anymore, I would say 6, 7, 8 years ago, yeah.
Well, let's talk about 6, 7, 8 years ago. Miss Crosby, you were trained by the Army to snipe, or to be able to shoot out of a sniper rifle, right?
Yes, when I started my military career, yes, I was trained to do so.
You would agree that the Army held sniping competitions, right?
They did,
Open to the entire Army.
they did.
And in 2010, you won.
Yep, in 2010 and 2016, I won a few of those competitions.
Well, you also won in 2013
Yes,
and 2014,
yes,
and like you said, in 2016.
yes, I won a few of the sniper competitions
You
when I was
won-
in the Army.
You won those competitions 4 times in 7 years.
Yes,
You also hold the US Army record for the furthest bullseye.
no, not anymore. And as of 2017, I did hold that record, but as of today, I can't speak to who now holds that record.
Well, in 2017, you were able to hit your target from 1,504 yards away.
At that time, yes.
Now, I want to talk to you about this bullet. Because you were here today when Agent Debnath testified about this bullet.
I was.
You heard her say that it was found on the rooftop of your hotel, right?
I did hear her say that.
Miss Crosby, you would agree that you used bullets like this frequently when you were in the military, right?
When I was in the Army, yes.
Finally, Miss Crosby, let's talk to you about Thomas Capello. Well, actually, I want to talk a little bit more about your military time. You would agree that you served this country for nearly a decade.
I would agree with that, yes.
You risked your life for this country.
Yes.
To your knowledge, Thomas Capello didn't do that.
To my knowledge, no, Thomas Capello did not have a military record.
In fact, he wanted to defund the military.
That was my belief.
That made him dangerous.
In my opinion, yes, I disagree with that entirely.
And you voiced your opinion on the internet, right?
I was vocal about my dislike for Thomas Capello, yeah.
Let's talk about that. I'm approaching Mr. Jones for exhibits 12 and 13. Can I approach witness consent?
Yes, okay.
Now, Ms. Crosby, I've just handed you 2 of your tweets, is that right?
Yes,
They're from your Twitter account.
yes, they are.
Those are your words.
Yes, I did make these posts.
And they haven't been changed since you sent those posts out.
Doesn't appear so.
At this time, the government offers exhibits 12 and 13.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Roger.
But let's start with exhibit 13. You tweet, "It's Patriots Day." Is that right?
Yes, it's Patriot Day. It was July 4th.
Right, like you said, it was July 4th.
Yes,
I want to go on to that first tweet. You say that Senator Capello is a threat to every person in this country.
that is what I tweeted.
You say that as long as he is alive, none of us are safe.
Well, for someone to want to defund the military, people who protect this country, I did say that that was a threat.
So that's a yes. You said that as long as he was alive, none of us are safe.
I did say that.
You said it's time for Patriots.
Yes,
I want to look carefully about the date that you sent out that tweet. That was on April 5th, 2022.
yes.
Could you tell us what day you booked your stay in the Philadelphia hotel?
Booked my stay about 3 months ahead of time, so April 5th, 2022 was the day of my stay.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time. Permission to publish exhibits 12 and 13 to the jury.
Great.
No, you're up for the witness, Your Honor. We ask that you be allowed to step in. And at this time, we would rest our case in chief and we're ready to proceed to closing.
Great. You ready to proceed?
Permission to gather some documents. Sir?
Yeah, take as much time you need.
May I proceed?
Yes.
July 4th, 2022 at 1:46 p.m. Senator Thomas Capello stepped out onto the stage of the political rally here in Pennsylvania and stepped on top of the world. He was a candidate leading the polls to be the next president of the United States. His future was bright and his support was red hot, evidenced by the thousands of supporters that had gathered to watch him. 1 minute later, it was all taken away. Members of the jury, 1 minute later, it was taken away by a skilled and experienced sniper. Because despite all of the support that Senator Capello had, all of the thousands of people that loved him, there were people that hated him too. But members of the jury, this isn't about the countless threats that Mr. Capello received. It's not about the thousands of supporters or protesters at his rallies. It's about one kind of person, a skilled and experienced sniper. And throughout the course of today's trial, we've proved that that skilled and experienced sniper is none other than the defendant. In just a moment, you'll be asked to go into jury deliberation. You'll be given this form. You'll be asked if we, as the government, have proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Blake Crosby killed Thomas Capello with malice aforethought. Or put simply, you'll be asked if we prove that Thomas Capello was killed by Blake Crosby deliberately and intentionally. So let's walk through some of the evidence that shows that when you add it all up, the answer to that question is a resounding yes. Starting with the investigation conducted by the Secret Service. Because today Mr. Jones has tried to say that because it was Agent DeVico's first time investigating a homicide, that it was flawed. And members of the jury, we would agree if she was working alone. But unlike the defendant, Agent DeVico didn't work alone. We know that she worked with other Secret Service agents, with other FBI agents. Case in point, she's not an expert on forensics, so she relied on the people who were. And that brings us to our next point, members of the jury. Agent DeVico wasn't looking for just anyone who didn't like Senator Capello and had access to a gun. They were looking for one kind of person. A skilled and experienced sniper. Enter the defendant. Because we can all agree that the defendant's resume is impressive. 4-time all-Army sniper. At once held the furthest bullseye record in a U.S. Army. Members of the jury, we can agree that the defendant is the most skilled and most experienced sniper in America. Because on her best day, She could shoot her target from 1,504 yards away. But on July 4th, all she needed was a rooftop with a clear 600 yards with a clear line of sight. And we know that that's exactly what she got on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel. And members of the jury, we know that the FBI agents found a few things important on that rooftop. Well, let's start with this bullet. Now, no, the bullet doesn't have forensic evidence or any DNA evidence, but we can tell a lot from this little piece of blue metal. Because we know that this is a 51mm bullet. And we know the kind of bullet, the kind of gun that it's supposed to be used with. A sniper rifle. Now, the defense pointed out an important point, that we don't actually have that full rifle. That's probably because the defendant disassembled it and it's scattered around landfills throughout Pennsylvania. But we do have something important. A piece of that sniper rifle. The same sniper rifle that was found in the trash can of the place the defendant admits to eating at after Senator Capello's assassination. A piece of the sniper rifle that this bullet was made to be used with. And we know that this bullet is something that the defendant used in the Army frequently. Investigators also found this cigarette. And members of the jury, we know a lot about this cigarette. We know that it was within 5 feet of a discharged fire. And we know whose cigarette is. The defendant's. Because we know that her DNA is all over it. Now, Mr. Jones mentioned something important. He said that we don't know what time it was put there, that we had to guess. Members of the jury, I want to be clear. If anyone had to guess, it's because the defendant lied so many times. Now, the defendant did not admit to being on that rooftop. We know that. She was asked, have you seen? No. Do you recognize a picture of it? No. Has you ever been up there? No. Then she was shown that cigarette, and all of a sudden everything came to light. And conveniently, she was there on July 3rd, not July 4th. But members of the jury, we know that there's an eyewitness who places her up on that rooftop on July 4th before the senator was shot. Members of the jury, be clear. July 4th, 2022, for most of us, was a day to celebrate American independence. For the defendant, it was Patriot Day. Taken on its own, the street might not mean much. But we know that July 4th was a long time coming for the defendant. Because just a few months before, she tweeted, Thomas R. Capello is a threat to every single person in this country. As long as he is alive, none of us are safe. This is a time for patriots. She posted that tweet, went to the next browser, and then she booked her hotel in Philadelphia. Members of the jury, while we were lighting sparklers, the defendant was loading her rifle. While we were gazing up at fireworks, the defendant was gazing through a scope. Members of the jury, while thousands like her peacefully protested, a skilled and experienced sniper pulled the trigger. So I'm asking you to find that skilled and experienced sniper guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. That's the closer.
We do, Your Honor. A moment to grab the document.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much. May we proceed?
Yeah, go ahead.
May I please court? The best the government can do is guess. Members of the jury, I've been sitting alongside my co-counsel here, Mr. Darwish, and he wrote something down during the cross-examination of the agent that the government called to the stand today. We looked for anything on that rooftop that could tie this crime to Blake Crosby. And doesn't that just sum up the government's case? They chose their suspect before they had the evidence. They guessed that Blake Crosby was the person who fired that gun, but members of the jury, a guess is not good enough. Because today, when the government charged my client with murder, they brought with them a burden to prove every single element of that charge beyond a reasonable doubt. That means they had to show you identity and they had to show you intent. Two things that they failed to do here today. Because what you learned, what you found out throughout the course of this trial was that the best they can do is guess. How do you know? Because they walked you through their case and it had guess after guess after guess, starting with the first one, the time that this assassination happened. Because everyone here agrees that at 1:45 p.m., Senator Capello was assassinated. But what the government failed to prove here in court today was that Miss Crosby was on that rooftop at that time. And how they tried to do that was through a sworn statement of an eyewitness. Told you at 12:45 p.m. that person saw Miss Crosby going up to the roof. But you have another eyewitness statement and evidence members of the jury that you'll get to review today, saying that 100% Miss Crosby was at the rally at 1:45 p.m. Two statements. And it's an easy question that you can ask here, where was the defendant? But that's not quite what you have to do today. It's what did the government prove? And what we have here is effectively a he said, she said, and a he said, she said is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They failed to prove that Blake Crosby was the person on that rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel. Moreover, members, they brought you this cigarette. They told you that it tested positive for the defendant's DNA, and we agree. Miss Crosby actually told you herself that she wasn't quite honest with the FBI the first time they asked her. That she was up on the rooftop on July 3rd of 2022. But members of the jury, an important fact came out today, and it's that that cigarette had gunshot residue. And the government is using that to say that, of course, that means the defendant was the person who was smoking that cigarette at the time that the gun was shot. But I ask you, members of the jury, if the defendant leaves that cigarette butt on the rooftop where the government found it, and someone else crouches over and snipes our senator and says, here's the case. That cigarette butt's gonna have gunshot residue. Of course, members of the jury, it has gunshot residue. We all agree that the person who assassinated Senator Capello shot from that rooftop. But what the government hasn't proven is that the person who was there was Blake Crosby. That brings us to the second guess of the government's case today, the murder. Because all throughout today's trial, the government has been trying to convince you that this was done by a sniper rifle, a skilled and experienced sniper, and maybe that's true. But I want to remind you of what you just heard from Ms. Edwards just a moment ago. If anyone had to guess, that's probably because that murder weapon was scattered across landfills across America. Probably, members of the jury, when someone's life is on the line, probably is the burden that the government decides to attach to their proof. Probably is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They failed to prove that the murder weapon in this case was a sniper rifle. They failed to prove that this defendant was connected to a murder weapon. I mean, what do they think happened here? That she traveled through TSA with a sniper rifle over her shoulder? It's not reasonable. They failed to prove that she had access to the weapon they're claiming is responsible for this crime. Which brings us to guess number 3. Because today you heard that the government chose their suspect before they had the evidence. This murder, it was a public execution. Someone shot Senator Thomas Capello in an open field. They killed him in that public arena. And the government has tried to tell you that it's only done by a skilled and experienced sniper. You know where skilled and experienced snipers come from, members of the jury? The military. And guess who was protesting Mr. Thomas Capello? So many members of the military. Miss Crosby told you herself. She was arm in arm with other people who detested the views that were being expressed by Thomas Capello. The government hasn't ruled out that any of those thousands of other suspects could have had access to that rooftop. In fact, they did the opposite, because what you heard today was to gain access to the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel. You don't even need a key card. You don't need a key. You can just push that door open, set up a sniper rifle, and kill a senator. Members of the jury. This is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They have failed to prove the time. They have failed to prove that my client had access to their murder weapon, and they have failed to prove that she is the only suspect who had a motive in this crime. Today, they have done guess after guess after guess after guess. And the judge will tell you that a guess is not good enough. That's why I urge you to return the only verdict that is consistent with the facts and that the law demands in this case. Not guilty. Because the best the government could do was guess. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Any rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor.
Absolutely.
Yes. The defense is right. This cigarette doesn't tell us what time it was disposed of. Anyone had access to that rooftop for countless threats made against Mr. Capello. I mean, slam dunk. We can all go home. Except, members of the jury, we don't have to guess what kind of person committed this crime. Because the defendant told us. A skilled and experienced sniper, their DNA was found on the cigarette. A skilled and experienced sniper, they would know how to turn that rooftop into a platform for murder. A skilled and experienced sniper knew how to make good on that promise to rid the country of its most dangerous threat. That skilled and experienced sniper was a defendant. Find her guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Yes, judges, I'll take some time to hear about. Judges, just let me know when you're done.
Yeah, I'll get the all clear. We can start.
Oh.
I can look and grab that marker.
Yeah.
Look at it.
And we're good to go.
Cool. Okay.
Thanks.
Well, let's, I guess we'll start down here and work our way around.
My name is Heather Cavity, I'm a former competitor, and I'm a current member of the Villanova National Trials Team. I want to tell you both that you did incredible. You are powerful, your cadence is incredible, you shine on cross-examination, and I think that the best thing for you would be a little bit more silence. You know, feel comfortable, let us get the chills. You are incredible, your eye contact, your personality, it shines through. The only thing I would say for you is maybe like varying your cadence, because you have a very smooth, you know, style, and a little variation in that would be great, but you guys are excellent, congratulations on it.
Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Leslie Baskin, I'm a partner at Spectrum Gavin Rosen and